Yeah, I'm Margaret Ann Windsor, and I'm trying to show this so I know which one to put up. Don't get confused. Okay, bear with me because I'm going to use a stand again. Or try to, anyway. Probably not going to end up with it working either. Is it still going? Laugh about it. I don't know what else to do. It's still on there. So, okay. Are you still there? Anybody? Well, half the video will be done. You know what? I don't know. Let me take it out and maybe it'll look. I don't know if it will or not. I spent all my time trying to get it up, trying to laugh because that's how I get through it. Really? So I don't know exactly what I'm going to put on this one. I said I was going to put two up, and I am. Well, I don't know. Maybe I won't. I was telling about being in high school, well, in school, and the taunting and being called bastard and all that, and the horror stories with Lina, and I'm going to put this up so somebody else can call me a liar and all this. My husband he's working at Lockheed Marietta, so this would be when we first moved back to Atlanta, or Marietta, Smyrna. And we were living at Overbrook Apartments then, so this was back in about the time Martin Luther King, we moved over there, was shot. And nobody ever tells the truth about that either, this whole mess. Andrew Young, Reverend, nobody wants to tell that because it connects to all of it. So anyway, I hesitate to tell it, but I'm being slandered and called every name in the book when there's a whole different side to it. My husband brought this couple. Well, come find out, she lived there, just in a different building. Steve and Rita Stevens. And later, he worked with John at Lockheed, and I found out she lived right down from me in the same complex. And we hit it off, she and I did. Rita Ann. Well, that's Margaret Ann, really, is her name. And the only thing I could remember at the time, I didn't remember any of this or think about it really. I remember her saying, well, I lived in Moulton, Alabama for a short time, and her dad was with the CIA. She said that he was with an agency, and I think she said out of Langley, but that he drove the Trailway. I don't remember if it's Trailway or Greyhound. I think it was probably Trailway. It was the only bus that came into Moulton. And there's a lot there surrounding that. I was I'm trying to think, in the 6th, 7th grade, we lived at the old Doc Sanders house. It was really looked like a small castle, not a really nice one, but it was made different, brick, and had, I've forgotten how many floors to it. Had a cabin out back of it. And old Doc Sanders used to sit there before the fireplace, and she'd take care of it, and his wife did. Anyway, we had a room there. And I started remembering when Rita Ann had said that. Later I did. I didn't remember it while we were friends. And she had a little son named Scotty later that was younger than my son, Martin Scott. So anyway, we met each other then at Overbrook, and so this is in the late 60s. And my husband flew, and I believe her husband flew, Steve. So what I'm going to get to here is we became friends, and then she and her husband and her son moved out back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, I believe. She had a sister. And later I started remembering, she said her father had suddenly disappeared, that he worked at Langley, the agency there. She'd be talking about the CIA. Now, I don't know. I've heard that the CIA had helped me. I don't know. Anyway, well, yeah, I know some of them did. One of the jobs I had, I that would have been trying to help me, and she was the one that kind of inferred or did say that my husband worked for the CIA, but I have to wonder, I don't know who the heck he worked for, really. Sure didn't see a paycheck from him, but I know he did work for one of the agencies. Anyway, I'm telling the horror stories that everybody's having fun with right now, some of them out there. So let them get their kicks out of it, because it may backfire. You better hope all the truth in this isn't told, because it's one heck of a mess. Um, and I ain't the bad person either. You bet your sweet bippy I'm not. Okay, remember we're living. Okay, let me go back to where did it? Okay, wait a minute. Okay, go back to the fourth grade. That's well, I don't know if I was in the fourth. I might have been younger. That's where Rita Ann Reed is her name. Her father's last name was Reed, and he worked for the CIA out of Langley, outside D.C. in Virginia. And I don't know. We had moved into this house across from the Moulton Baptist Church. Anybody can check that out. I guess they've replaced it now, but it was there when I finished high school and later, so people would certainly remember it. Directly across the street from it was this big house that at one time had been kind of probably a mansion. Had a huge pool that was bricked in. I'm talking about a fish pond type, not swim in. It was a huge one, and it was bricked in. It was pretty, and the people that owned it had sectioned it off in apartments, kind of. There weren't that many people in it. It was still nice. I didn't get the nice. We moved in the back that had been the I won't say slave quarters, but it was the man that, well, he was a black man and had lived there for years. And he took care of the place and all that. So he was kind of, this is in downtown Moulton, across from the Baptist Church. Anyway, what happened was later I went back there in the same apartment where this happened. Rita Ann Reed, her father did this. But later, when I started working at the City Grill, I can remember just prior going to that same apartment because Christine Montgomery, I think it was her name, was in school with me. She lived there, and so the church was going over there and going to get her to come to church. Well, she was working City Grill, which I took her job. She left and moved up north and married, I think, and I got the job in late 10th, 11th, 12th grade, I guess, was when it was. And I'd work from 3 till 11, well, 11:30, and walk home in the dark 7 days a week, scared to death. Winter, summer, fall, terrified. And then to meet Lina Dempsey at the door, where I was scared to death of her. And I tried to keep Philip fed. And anyway, back to when Rita Ann, I met her, and she mentioned, well, she lived at Moulton. And I started remembering that we hit it off then. I must have been in second, third grade. I don't know. But anyway, she and I were real close friends. And her sister, she had a younger sister. And I don't remember her name. But anyway, she told me back then, I'm talking about at that time, I'm telling you just a bit of what happened to my life. And if this makes me a bad person because I was kidnapped and you all have allowed this to happen to me, well, then something's wrong with your thinking. Anyway, I went in that same apartment where this happened. This is the church going to get Christine Montgomery to come to church. Of course, she's working where I later took her job, but she didn't have a chance to come to work. She was working so hard, you know, because I did too. Because she didn't have that far to walk to get. I guess they picked her up. She had a ride. Anyway, I can remember that Rita Ann's father, that she said went missing. He worked for the CIA out of Langley, and she told me that much later when I met her, when John introduced me to her husband, Steve Stevens, and she come to find out Rita Ann lived in the apartment next to me. We became friends again, but I didn't remember anything like this then. She told me that they had lived there in Moulton, and she told me about the time, how old she was, and that her father had just disappeared. He had worked for the CIA in Langley, and he just disappeared. He was supposed to be driving the Trailway, I think. I'm not sure. It might have been Greyhound. I think it's Trailway back then. And just disappeared and never came back. Well, that's a lie. He did come back. I'm going to tell it. And I hope and pray that the whole world has to deal with all of it and how it's been kept. And I'm paying for the crimes committed against me and my children. It's been open season on me. And here you got Elizabeth in all her glory, who has committed every crime in the book. And people bow down to her, and the world thinks she's this terrific person. Works for the Illuminati, illegal, war criminal. It's my job, not hers. Won't speak out to tell the truth about my dad and my mom, Edward VIII and Claudia Ruth O'Keefe Windsor. Never married Wallace Simpson. She married a double. She was an American spy. So to check my DNA against this doubles wouldn't work. The Brits told me, and by the way, I'm going to entitle this, They All Lied, because when I was beaten up in Knoxville back then, my hair pulled out, there was a Brit at this homeless shelter. And he looked like, I suppose, similar to Pierce Brosnan later on, became a 007. And I saw what he was going through in order to try to protect me, okay? I did. I saw over the years part of what they were going through and some of the women going through that were Brits, what they had to do to stay over here. But back to this. The time period was when I was in third grade, maybe. I can't remember. It was back then, about that time span. And Rita Ann lived in that apartment where Christine, it was in the same house in front of us, and we played together, but I lived around in the back where the black man had lived all of those years, and you could, it hadn't been cleaned. And it had this horrible, I'm real sensitive to odors, and it had a horrible odor in it. I remember that. And this happened, and I told it, and we were made to leave. The sheriff told Tressie didn't care about me, Dempsey. It was because that I was supposed to be their niece. Of course, Peggy had been killed, and Carl, and they're keeping face. It's like doing something to me. I told, or to them, I'm supposed to be their niece. So she went to the sheriff, and he said we had to leave. I had to leave Lina, had to leave Philip. And I remember that this is Rita Ann's dad. I remember entering the bus, and I don't know if it was Greyhound or anyway, it had this Trailway. It was the same thing that when I left to go on my class trip, they still had a bus like this that had the back seat across the back. And this was similar to what happened. Somehow I remember The bus was parked downtown. It was backed in, and it was an eye optical that had opened. So these time periods can be checked. I can remember standing at the door of the bus, and this man opened it, and he took my hand and led me in. And I'm not going to give people that might watch this just for the fun of it, they think it's fun. I'm not going to get graphic, other than I choked on it and was screaming and crying. Oh, I remember. That was her father, Rita Ann Reed's father. So may he burn in hell. And he had a darling daughter, Rita Ann. Anyway, I can remember this. Is he a human being? I don't know. There must be plenty of them like him. But anyway, I can remember getting away, and I was choking on it, and looking back, and I was terrified, and he was standing outside the bus and laughing. So I went back, and I don't remember anything after then until, this is Rita Ann, that I met later I'm talking about. And when this happened, and she was younger than me, I might have been second, third grade. And she says, well, you can't come into our house, our apartment anymore. But for and I didn't understand why. So at one point, though, she said her mom had just come home with a baby. And for some reason, Rita Ann had me come with her. And when I walked in the door, I remembered him. He was standing there with his wife and the baby, and I started screaming what he had done to me. They took me out of there, and then Tressie, Lina Dempsey, the mother of the twins, this hideous person that I was told to call mother, they went to the sheriff, or Tressie did, and Tressie said that we had to leave. So we had to leave and go back to that old farm, Route 4, that old hut house, and live. And I can remember walking out when we had to leave, and it seemed so unfair, you know. And this person, Rita and them left, I guess. Well, of course they did, but I didn't know, you know. And I didn't even remember her when I first met her. And she said, well, we lived in Moulton. And she started telling me about her dad had worked for the agency, but he was like supposedly working for the Trailway bus, I think it was, and disappeared. Well, he didn't disappear because he came back. And I'm telling you this because all my life I've lived with this hell, that anybody could do anything to me because of who I am, my name, who my dad is, and the Illuminati. And then I have Jeff K. Jr. come up on the mountain up here, 94, 95, and tell me, after I had frozen and starved and was standing there, when he came up and they had flown in. So there's got to be records of it down at Roanoke Airport, or there's people that know it. Came up, and him and his cousin said, we came up to see how we made you live. Well, somebody got them tit for tat, because you don't just have the two of them with me telling all this about mind control and the Tesla files and programming people and taking down planes like the KAL, etc., etc. Oh, I can go back in high school when there was one went down with Dunn Montgomery, and I can't remember the other guy's name. They went down. I didn't know it at the time, but there was mind control used on that one. But anyway, there's lists of them. God knows the ones that I don't even know about. And now that I'm going to lose my train of thought. But this man showed up in Doc Sanders' house.